C, the first thing we're going to check is the top of the trailer. We have our clearance lights again. Make sure your clearance lights are properly mounted and secured, not cracked or damaged, free of moisture, and they are amber in color. Talk about the front of the trailer. You can call this one or two things. You can call it either a header board or a bulkhead. Whatever you want to call it, you can. So check your header board. Make sure it's properly mounted and secured. It is not bent, broken, or damaged, and it fully supports your load. On the side of the trailer, we have all of our DOT stickers. We need to make sure that they're all there and none are missing. Make sure they're properly mounted and secured, they're clean, and they're visible. Next is our landing gear. Make sure the landing gear is properly mounted and secured. It's not bent, broken, or damaged. Make sure your supports are in the upright position, and make sure your handle is properly mounted and secured in the locking position. Underneath, if you want to, we can get fully in here. Underneath, we have all these guys right here. These guys are called cross members, or you can call them I-beams. But we need to call either or. Make sure your cross members or I-beams, they're all here. None are missing. Make sure they're properly mounted and secured. Make sure they're not bent, broken, or damaged. Now we're on our trailer axle. On our suspension again, we have our spring mounts. Make sure your spring mounts are properly mounted and secured. All bolts are present. It is not bent, broken, or damaged. This guy is going to be our torsion bar. Make sure our torsion bar is properly mounted and secured. It's not bent, broken, or damaged. We have our leaf springs. Make sure your leaf springs are properly mounted and secured. They're not bent, broken, or damaged. What holds everything down is our two U-bolts down here. Check both of our U-bolts. Make sure the U-bolts are properly mounted and secured. Make sure they're not bent, broken, or damaged. Check those nuts at the bottom. Make sure they're showing no signs of trails of rust or any shiny threads that would show indication of looseness. Brakes. Have our brake hoses. Make sure the brake hoses are properly mounted and secured. They're not cut, frayed, or leaking. They connect to our brake chambers. Make sure your brake chambers are properly mounted and secured. They're not bent, broken, or leaking. On the front of our brake chambers is the push rod and slack adjuster. Make sure the push rod and slack adjuster are properly mounted and secured. Make sure your pin is in. Make sure you release your brakes. Pull on it by hand to make sure there's no more than 1 inch of play. Inside here, we have our brake lining and our brake drums. Once again, the brake lining need to be at least 1/4 of an inch thick. Brake drums, not cracked or damaged, and free of any kind of oil or grease. We're gonna work our way back out. On the way out, you're gonna be passing the middle here again, which is your bud spacing. Make sure your bud spacing is free of any kind of debris, and make sure your tires are not rubbing or touching. Once again, we have our ICD. Inflation, condition, and depth. Inflation is going to be 110 psi by using the valve stem with the tire pressure gauge. Condition, no cracks, no bulges on the sidewall. Make sure your tires are evenly worn out. Your depth, make sure it is a minimum of 230 seconds. Our rim, properly mounted and secured. Make sure it's not bent, broken, or cracked, and it has no illegal welds on it. Check my lug nuts. Make sure they're all there, none are missing. Once again, I'm going to be looking for trails of rust or any kind of shiny threads that would show indication of looseness. Next is going to be our hub oil seal. Hub oil seal is properly mounted and secured. All bolts are present. We want to make sure it's not leaking. Working our way to the back, we have a side marker light. Make sure your side marker light is properly mounted and secured. It's not cracked or damaged, free of moisture, and it's red in color since we are at the rear of the vehicle now. It's going to be red in color. Okay. Next, we have our reflectors. Make sure your reflectors are properly mounted and secured. Make sure they're not cracked or damaged. They're clean and visible. Back of the trailer. At the very top again, we have our clearance lights. Make sure the clearance lights are properly mounted and secured, not cracked or damaged, free of moisture, and make sure they're red in color. Talk about your door. Make sure your door is properly mounted and secured. It is not bent, broken, or damaged. You also want to make sure your door can open and close, and make sure your latch, it is properly mounted and secured in the locking position. Check our lights next. Once again, we have tail lights, brake lights, left turn signal, right turn signal, and four-way flashers. Make sure they're properly mounted and secured, not cracked or damaged, free of moisture, and make sure they're all working properly. Make sure your bumper is properly mounted and secured. Make sure your bumper is not bent, broken, or damaged. Last item we have is going to be our mud flaps. Make sure the mud flaps are properly mounted and secured. Make sure they're not bent, broken, or damaged. Make sure the mud flap itself is not cut, frayed, or damaged. You want to make sure they're no higher, no more than 8 inches from the ground. Okay, so the first two things you do before you get inside: close your hood on both sides and latch it, and shock your wheel. When you get inside, we're going to be checking 3 things. Underneath the passenger seat, we have our triangles and spare fuses. Underneath me, I have my fire extinguisher. I need to make sure it's properly mounted and secured, and make sure it's properly charged. Next, we're going to do a safe start. Safe start is going to include my seatbelt. I need to make sure it's properly mounted and secured. It's not cut, frayed, or torn. Make sure it properly latches. Next, what we did earlier, turn the key just to the on position. I need to make sure I'm in neutral, and I'm going to pull on my brakes to make sure they're engaged. Once my seatbelt's on, I'm in neutral, and my brakes are good, I'm going to start it up. That's going to make it safe to start. Next, I'm going to start checking my mirrors again. Mirrors, they need to be properly mounted and secured, not bent, broken, or damaged. Make sure they're not cracked, and have no illegal stickers. As well, since I'm inside now, I need to make sure they're properly adjusted for me. Talk about the windshield. Windshield needs to be properly mounted and secured, not cracked or damaged, clean and free of any kind of illegal stickers. Next, I would turn on my heater and defrost. Turn it all the way to the right. Check your heater and defrost. You want to make sure that it is working correctly, which I feel it now, so it is working correctly. Next is going to be the wipers and washer fluid. Make sure they are working correctly, which they are. After that, we're going to check my city horn and then my air horn. After my horns, I'm going to check my lights. Turn my lights all the way on. That's going to be my low beams. Check my high beam indicator, which it is working correctly. Next, I have my left turn signal, my right turn signal, as well as my 4-way flashers. Now I'm going to talk about my gauges. We have 5 gauges to talk about, like we were doing earlier. We have our water, our oil, voltmeter, our primary, and our secondary air pressure. All you have to do is just name it, read wherever it's at, and just say it's working properly. My water temperature, it's reading about 170, so it's working properly. My oil pressure, it's reading about 40, so it's working properly. Voltmeter, it's reading about 14, so it's working properly. My primary and my secondary air pressure, they're both reading 120, so I know it's working properly. I have now checked everything I needed to. So what I'm going to tell my examiner is I am now ready to perform an air brake test. To perform an air brake test correctly, you got to make sure that you are filled to the proper range, which we are. We're at 120, so that's good. What we have to do now, kill the engine, turn the key to the on position, and we got to release both brakes. So off, on, release, okay? Once we have off, on, and pushed in our brakes, we're going to sit here and not do a damn thing. We're going to just sit here for 1 minute. During this 1 minute, we cannot lose no more than 3 PSI on our gauges in 1 minute, okay? So you will simply sit here for 1 minute. We have a timer. You would go ahead and hit start, and you would tell the instructor that we're just going to sit here for 1 minute. We want to make sure we lose no more than 3 PSI in a minute. You will fully wait a minute with him. Today, you and I, let's just say we did a minute, okay? So what we're going to do next, we're going to apply pressure. Hold our pressure down firmly. We don't have to press really hard, but just firm, okay? We're going to hold this down for 1 minute. During this time, we cannot lose no more than 4 PSI in a minute. Once again, we cannot lose no more than 4 PSI in a minute while we are pressing down on our brakes. You will sit there and wait a full minute with him. Once again, let's just say you and I did wait a minute, okay? Make sure we didn't lose no more than 4 PSI. What we're going to do next, we're going to start fanning our brakes. What we're trying to do is fan our brakes until they get around 60. When they get around 60, we should hear our warning buzzard and see our warning light come on. So I'm going to go ahead and start fanning until it gets around 60. Okay, so we see our warning lights come on and we also hear the buzzard. So we're good. We know that's working correctly. So what I'm going to tell the examiner now, I'm going to continue to fan my brakes. When my pressure gets in between 40 and 20, I should see both of my brakes pop out. So I'm going to fan until somewhere in between 40 and 20, both of these brakes should pop out. So focus on these brakes. You gotta make sure both of these pop out. The red one popped out. Gotta make sure that yellow pops out. There it is. So, keep on fanning until both pop out. Once they have both popped out, that tells me that my brakes are working correctly. Okay? So we're gonna start it back up. We're gonna build our pressure back up. I was gonna tell you to decline anything, but okay, so once that buzzer goes off, that's going to be safe for you to jump out and grab your chocks. So I'm going to go ahead and just grab my chocks real quick and I'll jump back in. You stay here. I'm just going to grab them. Grab your chocks and just get back inside. Do not forget to put your seatbelt back on when you get inside. So what you're going to do is just make sure you build your pressure back up. We got to get back to proper range. All right. So our last thing that we have to do is do a tug test. Okay. To perform this tug test correctly, what we're going to do is we're going to tug against our trailer first. So I'm going to keep the trailer engaged. I'm going to push in my tractor. I'm going to put it in gear. What I'm going to do is just give it a little bit of gas. I got to feel it tug. Once you feel it hold yourself back, that's good. Engage your tractor. Disengage your trailer. Now we got to test our tractor brakes. Do the same thing. Just give it a little feel. It's holding you. Good. Release both of them now. What we're going to do is roll forward. During this time, I'm going to hold the steering wheel with both hands. I have to make sure that the steering wheel doesn't pull left or right when I hit the brakes. So roll forward, hit the brakes, and I'll tell my instructor, I did not feel it pull left or right on me. Put it back into neutral, pull out my brakes, and now I would say that I am now complete with my pre-trip inspection. And that's it.